For Sunday, December 20th, you found the Georgia Gang. And topping our agenda today, hey, there's only 5 shopping days left till Christmas. We're going to talk about merit pay for teachers, a transit tax in Fulton County, and a cab on the GM plant. Those are the stories that are up for grabs on the Georgia Gang.
From the Fox 5 studios, the Georgia Gang starts now.
Okay, this is where I say there are only 5 shopping days left until Christmas. I got kind of ahead of myself there. And we will head into the Christmas week with the news of this week. And most of us are still thinking about those 5 shopping days. But at the state capitol, the teachers' unions have come out in force to say they want no part of merit pay for teachers. Governor Deal and his panel on education have looked at that. But I think the bigger news this week, Phil, was that David Ralston, the Speaker of the House, said he didn't want merit pay either.
That was a surprise.
Yeah.
You don't usually see a division like that among the governor and of course, the Speaker of the House of Representatives. Hopefully that'll be smoothed out. A lot of us, I know you like merit pay, and it has to be structured properly. And I think the governor's going to prevail if I can look in the crystal ball.
Well, I'm not so sure either, because the teachers' organizations are not in favor of it either. And Ralston has to be reelected. The governor does not. And so I think that's an important part to remember. And plus, I don't know where it's actually been proven that you can actually make that work. If it depends on student performance to get advances for teachers. And so that throws us back to teaching to the test again.
Well, see, I have that same reservation, which is, Jeff, that why would a teacher want to go into a real low-performing school if he or she wasn't confident that they could actually get the performance scores up, you know, if their pay depended on it?
You know, I would like to see merit pay for members of Congress. The more money they save us on taxes, the higher their pay goes. So obviously you'd like to see the same thing for school teachers. We want to give them some incentive to go into these low-performing schools, to raise those grades up, to do the best job that they can. Merit pay is, I don't know, it's just it's organic in a capitalist society. It motivates us to do better, to work harder, and that's what we want our teachers to do.
You know, I've always supported merit pay, no question. But the lesson of the Atlanta Public Schools cheating scandal actually kind of soured me on the notion, because we could never prove this, but we've always thought that a lot of those teachers did what they did because they had bonuses at stake.
Well,
and Beverly Hall, the superintendent, the late superintendent, certainly did herself.
Well, they had bonuses at stake, but they also had federal mandates at stake and federal funding at stake.
Right.
And so that was as much of a pressure as the pay.
Yeah, but to Jeff's point, I agree with you. I think even in a low-performing school, that's where we need those teachers the most, and we need to reward them the most. And yeah, you have to have some metrics, and you have to make sure there's no cheating.
In principle, I agree. I want to agree.
Yeah.
In principle.
And I don't think that you cheat in any other industry because you can get higher pay if you do a good job. You just do a good job. I don't think that's what was motivating the teachers in APS. They couldn't raise the grade, and they were under pressure year after year after year to get a 3% increase in academic performance, a 5% increase in academic performance, and the only way that they could demonstrate that was with an eraser.
Now, one of the only problems that I would see is that if a principal tries to play favorites, and I think that has to be maybe ironed out.
Well, I think that's why David Ralston, respectfully,
I think that's one of his concerns,
right.
But that can be worked out.
And I think the Republican members of the General Assembly would have some of the same reservations that perhaps Alexis and I are discussing, and I think Ralston reflects that. Now let's change the subject to water. I must admit I don't know a lot about this, but apparently in the massive spending bill, which we're going to talk about later, that passed Congress on Friday, there was an insertion by an Alabama senator,
right, Richard Shelby,
that said that the Justice Department should look into whether Georgia is using too much water. Almost stopped the whole bill.
Well, yes, it was just some very tricky language that was inserted by this fellow at the very last minute.
Legislator from
I know
Alabama.
you're shocked at that, but the whole Georgia delegation, Democrat and Republican, rose up in a revolt And it almost stopped the bill on Thursday. And so as we tape, they seem to have worked it out and taken out the language.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the bill did pass, 316
Yes.
votes.
Yes.
Pretty
It's
amazing.
well, on Friday afternoon, it would still have to go to the U.S. Senate.
Yeah, it's still.
Right.
We'll talk about that
The
a little
House.
later. Now, closer to home on spending, I didn't see this one coming. The Fulton County Commission convened a meeting of all the mayors in Fulton County, except Kasim Reed. He didn't appear at this meeting. And they discussed whether they should have, if I can get this right, a 1% sales tax for transportation, a 3/4 cent sales tax, or a 1/2 cent sales tax, or whether MARTA should just go ahead and ask for its own 1/2 cent sales tax. And from what I could absorb, there is no agreement whatever on a common transportation package.
Well, that's right. I think it's going to be a heavy lift to have this 1% sales tax. The idea is to have it next November. They have not
Referendum, yeah.
a referendum to go to the voters. They have not, as you're pointing out, they have not had a project list. True, we need some bridges and infrastructure and all of that. We all agree on that. But I just don't think there's, to your point, I don't think there's going to be agreement on what we're going to do.
And I think Kasim Reed, I don't know where he was, why he didn't go to the meeting, I have no idea. But I think he knows it's a non-starter too.
Well, I'm not so sure that it's a non-starter. I think that you can probably get some consensus. For instance, if you were to ask the mayors, should we have a special option tax for transportation, I think the overwhelming majority of them will say yes, because they've got some pent-up
Right.
demands for transportation
have to see
projects
the
in their
projects.
areas.
You have to see the
Exactly
projects.
right.
Yeah.
But when you start adding on some of the layers, transit and those kinds of things, that's when it gets a little contentious.
Right.
Now, in previous years, we have all of us, been extremely critical of the Georgia Ethics Commission. That's not what it's really called, but that's what we're going to call it. I'm not going to use that other name. And they didn't do a thing. They didn't have a budget, they didn't have a staff, they didn't have an attorney. And boy, it's kind of fun, I got to say, to see them taking some action on some of these older cases, 4 and 5 and 6 years old. John Oxendine, that case has been there forever when he ran for governor. And Phil, can you explain it? They said he didn't take illegal campaign contributions, but they said that he did commingle funds to be used for a primary and a runoff.
That's exactly right. Now, unfortunately,
Did I do that right? I hope so.
Yeah, in fact, there was so much dysfunction in that ethics commission that some of the statute of limitations ran out, which is terrible.
Yeah.
You know, so these people get off scot-free, a lot of them, and some of the Oxendine charges were dismissed because of that. And aside from what you just described, one of the other problems was that he used money from his campaign fund to help boost his law firm and then wanted to pay it back.
Well,
so.
And there were two other lawmakers, one a state representative
Right.
from Augusta and one a Clayton County commissioner, and apparently they were
Well, these are egregious.
they were using campaign cash
Yeah.
for personal purposes.
Right.
And the Augusta Democrat actually had no records as to what he used the money for. So I think he's in trouble.
Well, it's interesting to see, though, what a little spade work does, what a little legwork and detective work can do.
Well, the legislature and the governor, to its credit, finally gave it some money. They've got a good,
You gotta be able to
they've got a
fund
good
it.
lawyer.
Exactly right.
Yeah, so we're
That's
finally
right.
getting some action we didn't get
Yeah.
for 3 whole years.
3 years. All right. We got to get out of this segment. One more topic, because it's right in Phil's wheelhouse. Senator Josh McCoon of Columbus has put in an English-only constitutional amendment.
That's right.
But English would be the official language.
That's right.
It's already law.
We have a state law.
So why does he need a constitutional amendment?
It's an extra layer of protection
Oh, my.
because there's loopholes in the law, and even this will kind of surprise you. One of the loopholes, a quick example, is with the Department of Driver Services issuing driver's licenses for the written test in 11 foreign languages.
Oh,
now,
my goodness.
Now, wait a minute. All the signage is in English. Why are we doing that?
I've been saying that for 40
I know you
years.
have. So it's a public safety issue
well,
there, too.
And it's a public safety issue for people to be able to pass the regulations to get the license, too, so that they can understand the law.
Give the
and
test
then
in English.
all the signs
Even you were
are
in favor of
symbols.
that.
I think that if I were a foreign language speaker, I'd still know stop.
How about
Exactly.
how about bridges out when you're on your motorcycle? Would you know that one?
I don't want somebody going out on the road after passing that test in Latvian.
Well, and this is the
Right.
point
Well, they've
of
got
the
they've
amendment.
got new symbols now for steps. Have you seen that one?
Well,
All right. We got to get out. When we come back, a prediction of Jeff's last week comes true. Stay with us.
Have a question or comment for the Georgia Gang? Visit their website at fox5atlanta.com.
We spent a lot of time on this broadcast wondering what would happen to the old GM plant. It's a prime site in Metro Atlanta, a huge plot of land with a MARTA station, with 2 expressways right near it, and it's ripe for development now that the recession is easing. I've said for many years, with a half smile on my face, that that's where the Mercedes-Benz Stadium should have gone, and that's where the Falcons should play. Lost that one, didn't I? But last week we were discussing whether the DeKalb Commission would in fact grant a tax allocation district to allow Egbert Perry's development to proceed on that GM plant site. Jeff said the commission would approve it. They did unanimously. I wasn't sure.
Well, yeah, and now, of course, the next step is for the school board to do the same thing. That is likely to come up next year. You know, that's a huge share of county taxes, and so that's going to be an important piece for this project to go forward.
Well, you know, the new superintendent, Dr. Stephen Green, put out, I thought, a very cogent statement opposing that tax allocation district. And he had several reasons.
Well, expressing
the ones
some
in DeKalb haven't
reservations,
worked.
I think it's the way that I would say.
Is that how you'd say it?
He expressed some reservations.
Well, it was the
about
tax
it.
break for 25 years is what he had a problem with.
Well, it is. It is, but it doesn't really affect the current tax revenues going to the county government or the. So what we're talking about is an increment that this project would generate that would actually go toward paying off.
But should we have a giant tax break for that long?
Well, you know, I don't think that you're going to be able to generate the economic
Kind of
development
investment.
there that in the absence of a tax allocation district that you'd be able to generate. First of all, you got to do the infrastructure, and the infrastructure in that project is going to be huge. We're talking about a tunnel
now,
to
there has
the
to be
station.
a tunnel.
That's right.
Who knew about the tunnel to the MARTA station?
That's right.
That added
that was a
added
surprise.
largely to the cost.
Yeah.
I also, just as a political note, I thought it was interesting that the DeKalb School Board and the superintendent pointed to Atlanta's Beltline TAD, or Tax Allocation District, where Kasim Reed has withheld the money from the Atlanta public schools.
Well, you know, I think that it's just a matter of how the deal is structured. That deal was not structured very well. There were fixed payments in that deal instead of a percentage of revenue. Exactly right. And at a very, very bad time. Obviously, you're talking about 08, 09,
With
when
the
the real estate
collapse.
market collapsed. And so this is a different, they can take a completely different approach that works well for everybody.
All right, as we taped last week, the Atlanta Board of Education was discussing hiring its own police for the Atlanta public schools instead of using City of Atlanta policemen. I know some policemen who have worked in the schools. I thought that was a pretty good idea. I can understand, however, why the chief might want those policemen back on the beat. But are school resource officers, are they the same thing as real police?
I think that they are. You know, when you look at DeKalb County and some of the other
DeKalb
school
has it.
districts that have school resource officers, they work really well in tandem with police. They know when to call the police when there's an issue that's going on. And yes, I mean, you want police officers to be on the street out there chasing criminals and not policing kids in the hallway in an elementary school. And so I think that there is a role for school resource officers. I know that there's a lot of controversy about it in APS, but I think it's a good move on their part.
And they are certified. They can have weapons, and I don't have a problem with it.
Okay.
Well, and I think it does give an additional layer, and like you say, it separates them from real police. And
And I think they can get to know the students better a little bit as opposed to a
they're
regular.
I think that's part of the idea, that they're there all the time.
Right.
right.
Kasim Reed, man of his word, this week went and gave pay increases to 200 sergeants. He's been doing that, I
We
think.
needed that.
Absolutely.
We needed that.
They hadn't had a raise in how long? Several years, correct?
Boost for morale.
Right.
I didn't know we had more than 200 sergeants, though. That's a lot of sergeants.
lot of
It's a big
sergeants.
police force now that it's up near 2,000 officers. And Hartsfield Airport took a blow in the rankings this week. The famous J.D. Powers Satisfaction Survey showed Hartsfield only the 8th most appreciated airport in the country. It's not very good. busiest airport.
Well, look who they followed, though. They were all these little teeny tiny airports.
Yes.
that,
Yes,
where
exactly
how
right.
could
I
you
think that
be
that's just
satisfied?
people complaining about the size or
Portland.
complexity of the airport.
Right.
That's right.
Yeah.
It's a big airport. So
And one note that I kind of enjoyed, John Wheeland, the home builder, who's familiar to, I think, any home buyer in Metro Atlanta, sold out this week to Pulte Homes.
Right.
Pulte.
John Wheelan did a development in Dunwoody a couple of years ago. It's still going up. And he's in his middle 80s. I think it was time for him to sell. I think it was time for him to enjoy something else.
He's had a good run.
He's
He
had a
has
real
had a
good
great
run.
run.
And he's
and
been a wonderful corporate citizen.
Yes.
He really has, and a great philanthropist.
All right, when we return, we'll have some news on a new Fox 5 poll, the presidential race in Georgia.
Have a question or comment for the Georgia Gang? Visit their website at fox5atlanta.com.
Presidential politics in Georgia is just a couple of months away with the SEC primary. And for the first time in years and years and years, lots of candidates are visiting Georgia because it's a wide open state, really. And Ted Cruz, for example, I think was here this past week. We've seen just about every one of the major candidates come to Georgia, but it doesn't seem to be working. Matt Towery did a poll for Fox 5 News that shows Donald Trump just blowing everybody away.
Well, it's a poll of prospective Republican primary voters. You know, our primary is coming up March 1st. And to no surprise, Trump is pulling 35% of that GOP electorate. Ted Cruz 16%, Rubio 12%, Jeb Bush 6%, and Ben Carson has really dropped. He's at 6%. Now, what's interesting about
He was
this
second
poll,
in that last poll.
That's
wasn't he?
right. What's interesting is if you take away all the other candidates, Matt Towery did another poll, and that pushes Trump's vote up to 40%. And I just thought that was very interesting that he picks up some votes
Well, this
in
is
the
probably,
top five, among the top
Right.
five.
probably a good time to discuss that debate this past week on CNN. Trump was the subject of attacks by Cruz and by especially Jeb Bush. He came through and he made one minor mistake, but
Minor?
and he made a lot of faces.
What was the minor mistake that you saw?
When he didn't understand what the nuclear triad
Yes,
was.
That was minor?
Well,
I don't think anybody understood what it was. But,
Yeah, but the presidential candidate ought to understand.
I think Trump held his own. He made news by finally saying that he would support the Republican nominee unequivocally. I thought that was the big news.
Well, I thought
What-
that I didn't know that was news. I thought that he made news when
already
he
said
said
that,
that he
yeah.
shut down parts of the internet.
Yeah,
Well, and you know
that
what? You
too.
can do that.
Well,
Syria,
North Korea does it.
In
Well,
Syria
North
does
Korea
it.
does it. China does it.
All those,
Yeah, I think that there's some other countries that do it.
totalitarian
And I
countries.
think that
But let's-
that was a good idea.
None of them have the Bill of Rights.
And I
by
thought
the
it was
way.
interesting that he said that it wasn't really a religious group. They were a bunch of thugs and they were a cult. And where did we hear that? Did the president say that too?
You
And-
said that just last week.
Yes, thank you. And so what does that mean? Where is Donald Trump?
It's funny. Trump had the debate. He was the subject of the whole evening, really. I mean, everything kind of revolved around him and off
Yes.
him and onto him.
Right.
The next night or so, he goes on to the Jimmy Kimmel show on ABC. Kimmel gave him the whole night, the whole program. And Trump was fantastic. I couldn't believe it. I said, this guy's really good. Except
Well-
I don't
He's a
know that makes
performer.
him
He's
good
an
at being
entertainer.
president.
Right.
He is a performer, there's no question, but he's also pulling votes into the primaries of people who haven't voted before. It's
Who
a very
haven't voted
interesting-
before. It's a very interesting development that you have a working class Republican base now that just didn't exist in previous presidential elections to this extent.
Well,
so
except
that
when Ronald Reagan ran.
65% now, exactly
Those were
right. So that
Democrats.
65% of Trump supporters never went to college, for instance. And it's just a fascinating phenomenon within the GOP establishment. I think that the mainstream Republicans at this point have got to figure out what they're going to do about Trump, because if he is the nominee, it's going to be very difficult for them to prevail in a general election.
But we don't know because of your very point. If he's bringing in, say, the 1.5 million, white working class people that Mitt Romney never could get, that's quite an addition. Now, I do think...
And then what would happen if he became president? What do you think?
Well, the same thing with Hillary. We don't know what's going to happen.
Yes, we do.
More
because
people don't trust
she's
Hillary
an
than...
establishment Democrat.
Well,
Come on,
more
you
people
know
don't
about
trust,
it.
what is it, 75% of the people don't trust Hillary?
Wait.
But back to the debate, I thought it was interesting that Chris Christie, this may surprise you, did, I thought, fairly well.
I thought he did very
Except
well.
he's a maniac. Come on, he's going to
You
shoot
don't like
down the
any of
Russian
them.
plane?
You don't like any of the
No, but listen to what
Republicans.
they said.
Jeb did a
It
little
was
better.
ridiculous.
I thought that Jeb took
He
some,
did?
some
Best
pretty
by
good
far,
shots
yeah.
I
at
thought it was
Trump.
the best by far, but it's too late.
And
Yeah, I
Carly,
agree.
Carly remained a committed liar. Yes.
You're not going to like
She
any of those
speaks with
Republicans.
such conviction. What about the generals?
Do you
All
like,
these
do you
generals,
like any of
and
the
one of them never
objectively?
even knew Obama.
Do you
He
like
said, I don't
any of
even
the
know the man.
Republicans objectively and how well they did? Do you
Well,
give them any
yes.
credit whatsoever?
There were some good performers, yes, I do give them credit, but most of them were just so far off to the right, it was impossible
When
to
it comes to trust,
seriously consider.
all of them have a higher trust factor with the public.
They
Well, one
do.
of the
Yeah.
one of the
Hillary,
interesting
Rodham,
things
Clinton.
was that the JV squad, apparently, our former senator from South Carolina had some zingers in there.
Current
That,
Senator.
Lindsey Graham.
Graham.
Lindsey Graham, yes, exactly
We're
right.
sort of running out of time. I did want to talk about that ridiculous omnibus spending bill that the Congress was passing as the week ended. It's a total betrayal of Republican principles, isn't it, Phil?
It is. I think it was a cave. The Democrats don't like one thing,
No,
though.
yeah, they don't-
You don't like the fact that now we
Crude
can
oil,
export
so they
oil.
can sell the oil so they can
It's all the
refine it and sell it
Republicans
back
got.
to us.
That's all they got.
That's all they got.
And they're this is really terrible. They're Democrats and Republicans who want to find work ought to be really upset. They're bringing in over 200,000 more foreign workers on these visas. Why are we doing that when we have people underemployed or unemployed?
$1.1 trillion. Republicans did get an awful lot of temporary tax cuts that are now permanent.
That's a different bill.
Well, I'm talking
part
about the
of it.
omnibus bill. It's part of the omnibus, 1.1 trillion. So they got the tax cuts. You know, you've got a lot of spending in there. There's more defense spending in this bill. But I think that what we've got is a practical speaker in Paul Ryan who knows that you need Democratic votes and was able to pull this deal together. And what he did was he got out all this crazy stuff about Planned Parenthood and Syrian refugees so that you could get a bill that could pass.
But you're giving President Obama the money to bring in the Syrian refugees. You're funding sanctuary cities. You're not stripping the money away from Planned Parenthood. It's a disastrous bill.
It is not.
No, it
It
isn't.
is a consensus bill that reflects the fact that we've got Republicans and
It
Democrats
reflects
in
the fact you got a liberal president.
All right, we got to
there.
get out. Darn it, I really wanted to talk about New Orleans stripping away the statues of 4 Confederate heroes, including Robert E. Lee.
It's a whitewashing of history.
We'll just have to save that for next week in the Christmas broadcast. A nice, happy topic. When we come back, winners and losers.
Time now for the week's winners and losers.
And we'll begin the process with you, Jeffrey.
Thank you, Dick. You said that we would wait till next week to talk about New Orleans. No need. I'll make them winner right now today for getting rid of those statues. I think a lot of other folks, particularly here in Georgia, ought to do the same. And Adele, a singer, is so popular, and I know this because I have a friend who listens to her album habitually, and it's a great album, by the way. But in 30 minutes, the concert sold out, and tickets aftermarket are selling for up to $18,000. I know that you're going to get some nosebleed seats for about 15 or so.
Wow, I know, it's a phenomenon. It is a total phenomenon. Is she a winner or a loser?
She's got to be a winner.
Yeah, you're not kidding.
Yeah.
She's rolling in it.
Yeah,
All right.
nobody's paying 18 grand to see us.
Phil, what you got?
You know, I've got a winner. Realtor.com has named some of the hottest real estate markets for next year, and guess who is in the top tier? That is sections of Atlanta, Sandy Springs, my city, and Roswell. So those are winners, and homeowners will like that. And also, remember Kelvin Cochran, he's my winner this week. He's the ousted Atlanta fire chief, a very sincere, committed Christian. He won a federal court appeal. His case is going forward, and I hope he beats Qasim Reed. That was a bad thing that Qasim Reed did to just oust him for his religion.
Alexis.
Okay, I'm going to leave that alone in the spirit of the season and be generous with you today, Phil, and tell everybody Merry Christmas and enjoy the holiday. And I want to salute John Whelan again for being a wonderful corporate citizen and philanthropist here in Atlanta over the years and providing luxury homes on all parts of town in Metro Atlanta. So congratulations to him. And then Tony Conway has opened a new special events place, and he is such a fabulous guy who does decorating and party and special events, and it's called Flourish, and it's across from the mansion which is called the Estates that he also owns.
All right.
He's a great guy.
That's all you got?
That's all I got.
All
No
right.
losers.
Braves are a winner, bringing back Chipper Jones. Since we can't identify any other Brave except Freddie Freeman, it'll be nice to see Chipper on the field as a coach. That would be an interesting test. Ask people to name the Braves roster, because you can't do it, I guarantee you. And how about Georgia State? After 3 years or so of absolute football futility in a startup program, the Panthers got to a bowl. Didn't do it the orthodox way, but they played yesterday in a bowl in Orlando against San Jose State. We don't know how they did, but we wish them well. And, you know, we talk about those statues coming down in New Orleans. They represent the lost cause, as it's called. Mm-hmm. Sort of, but the real lost cause are the Atlanta Falcons. And the Falcons play today at 1 o'clock on Fox 5 if you're
God bless
into lost causes. And we'll
Ouch.
see you next week on the Georgia Gang.
The opinions expressed in this broadcast are those of the panelists appearing in this program.